Hey, what is going on, guys? Lon here from Android Authority. And when the Oppo N1 came out last year, it was a pretty popular phone. I think a lot of people really liked it, but I think what put a lot of people off from buying it was its size. It had a 6-inch display, so it was just massive in the hand. But if you loved everything about the original Oppo N1, you just wished it was a little bit smaller, Oppo has the perfect solution for you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the Oppo N1 Mini. So here is the Oppo N1 Mini, and if you couldn't tell, it looks just like the Oppo N1 except smaller, obviously. Now, even though this is a mini phone, the first thing that struck me when using it for the first time was that it's not really that small. It definitely is smaller than the original Oppo N1, but it's still kind of a large phone. And this isn't a versus video or anything like that, but just as a quick size comparison, here it is next to some of the flagships of 2014, like the HTC One M8 and the Samsung Galaxy S5. And as you can see, it's pretty similar in size to these two flagships, if not a little bit bigger, because of the large top and bottom chin. Now, if you like the design of the original Oppo N1, you'll obviously love the design of the N1 Mini, and Oppo has always been really good with the build quality of their phones, and the N1 Mini is no exception. It's not the thinnest or the lightest phone, coming in at a little over 9mm thick and 150 grams, and it's also made of plastic, but the unibody design combined with the weight makes this phone feel very solid in the hand, and the curved back makes it very comfortable to hold. The model that I have here has a matte white finish, so it's got a decent amount of grip to it. It doesn't feel super slippery in the hand or anything like that. And the gold trim that wraps around the perimeter of the phone actually helps with the grip as well, while at the same time giving the phone a pretty classy look. All the buttons and ports are on the sides and bottom of the device. You'll find the power button on the left side, which was kind of awkward and took some getting used to, probably because I'm so used to it being on the right side. But on the right side though is the volume rocker, and along the bottom you'll find the 3.5mm headset jack, micro USB port, and speaker. And the speaker actually sounds pretty decent, but like many other phones with a bottom mounted speaker, it's very easy to cover up when using the phone in landscape. So if you're watching a video or playing a game, you'll probably find yourself muffling the speaker quite often.
Added sugars, caramel, all this other stuff. So they are the plane of the plane. And what we're gonna do is try and eat 5 of these as fast as we can.
Like many other mini phones, the specs usually take a step down, and that starts with the display. It's a 5-inch 720p LCD display instead of the 1080p like on the original N1, but it's got a decent PPI, so it actually still looks pretty sharp overall. The viewing angles are quite good, it gets plenty bright, and the colors on this display are very nice and vibrant without looking oversaturated, so I was actually pleasantly surprised with the overall quality of this display. As far as the specs go, the Oppo N1 Mini is being powered by a Snapdragon 400 processor, the Adreno 305, and 2 gigs of RAM. So very typical mid-range specs, just like many other mini phones out there. But in my opinion, the Snapdragon 400 processor has proven to be a very respectable mid-range processor, and the performance on the N1 Mini is quite good. Swiping and scrolling was smooth. I didn't notice any lag at all, really. Apps opened and closed quickly. The phone multitasked just fine without much of a hiccup, and gaming performance was pretty good too. It doesn't hold a candle to higher end spec smartphones out there, but for what it's worth, the N1 Mini's performance is pretty solid. Now, one of the most unique features of the original Oppo N1 was the swiveling camera, and that makes a return here on the Oppo N1 Mini. So your back camera basically rotates and becomes your front camera. And it's kind of a nice feature because it allows you to take some really high quality selfies if you're into that sort of thing. But the thing that I found the most interesting about this camera is that it's still 13 megapixels, just like it was on the original Oppo N1. Whether it's the same exact sensor with the same quality as the original N1, I don't really know because I never used the original N1, but it's at least good to see that the resolution is still the same. The camera interface is pretty basic and bare bones. You've got a few shooting modes, but nothing too different or unique that you can't find on any other smartphone camera. So the settings here are pretty standard. It doesn't have HDR mode, oddly enough, but you do get Ultra HD mode, which if you remember on the original Oppo N1, it allowed you to take 50 megapixel photos. Now on the N1 Mini, the bump isn't quite as drastic. Instead of 50 megapixels, Ultra HD mode allows you to take 24 megapixel photos, which is still pretty good, and I'll go ahead and let you be the judge as to whether or not the difference is noticeable. As far as the rest of the picture quality goes, this camera is actually a pretty decent shooter. Given the right lighting conditions, photos came out looking sharp and crisp. Colors looked really nice, they didn't appear washed out or overly saturated, and dynamic range is not too bad either, so I was able to achieve some pretty well balanced shots. This camera does suffer from the same problem that a lot of other smartphone cameras do, and that is the shifting of exposure depending on where you tap to focus on the screen, and low light isn't all that great either, but overall it's certainly not a bad camera, and just like the original Oppo N1, it's really good for taking selfies. With the battery, you're looking at a 2140 milliamp hour battery, so it's pretty small in today's standards, but with normal usage, you should be able to make it through a full day just fine, which I was able to do, and I managed to get at least 4 hours of screen on time out of it, and this is with texting, checking social networks like Facebook, Twitter, watching a little bit of YouTube, and playing my Clash of Clans. So if your usage is similar to mine or even less than mine, I think you'll be pretty satisfied with the battery life. Software wise, you're looking at Android 4.3 Jelly Bean, so hopefully we'll see an update soon by Oppo. But on top of Android is Oppo's own Color OS, and if you use an Oppo device before, this will be very familiar territory. It's not a super heavy skin, but it's not all that light either. It's somewhere in the middle, as it does preserve some stock Android elements like the lock screen and the recent apps menu. ColorOS does bring some pretty welcome additions to Android, although we've seen a lot of these before from other OEMs like the panel of toggles in the notification shade and the very handy brightness slider. You can also download and install themes with ColorOS if you don't like the way it looks out of the box, which I actually took advantage of, so it's nice to have a little bit of customization built in. Oppo's screen on and screen off gestures make a return here as well, so you can use the pre-built-in gestures to open the camera or turn on the flash, or you can create your own custom gesture to open any application of your choice. It feels a little bit gimmicky in my opinion, but if you don't like it, you can turn it off, which I ended up doing after a little while. You can get your hands on the Oppo N1 Mini now, and I'm seeing it go for roughly $550 on eBay, which is kind of pricey for a basically mid-range phone, and there's some higher end phones out there that you can get for a lot less than that, like the Nexus 5, which is still a great phone, or even the OnePlus One if you can get your hands on it, or even the brand new Moto X, which is $500 without a contract. But if you do want to get the Oppo N1 Mini, it does support LTE connectivity on carriers like T-Mobile and AT&T, so you don't have to worry about that. But there you have it for the Oppo N1 Mini. If you loved everything about the original Oppo N1, but you just wished it was a little bit smaller, then the Oppo N1 Mini is the perfect solution for you, if you don't mind the price tag and the slightly lowered specs. But it does bring all the things that made the original Oppo N1 great, like the swiveling camera and the solid build quality. But do not be deceived by the name, because even though this is a mini phone, there's absolutely nothing mini about it. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below, and also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below. And once you're done doing all that, make sure to check out the website at androidauthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.